Hello and welcome to the Repro Spot, the podcast that provides information about dairy reproductive management from top dairy reproductive physiologists at land-grant universities. My name is Dr. Victor Gomez-Leon, and I'm an extension dairy specialist for Kansas State University.
And my name is Dr. Jennifer Spencer, and I'm an extension dairy specialist for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And today we're here with Dr. Joe Dalton, who is a professor and extension specialist who focuses on dairy management at the University of Idaho. Dr. Dalton is focused on synchronization protocols, semen dosage, heat detection, genomics, and the training of AI technicians.
Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Gomez-Leon and Dr. Spencer, for the opportunity to speak with you today on the Repro Spot. It's always a good day to talk about reproduction.
I agree. And we're very happy that you could join us today. And we're actually very interested to hear some of your opinions about some of the reproductive areas that you've studied in. And so we'd like to discuss first an area that you're very knowledgeable in, and that's heifer reproductive management and genomics. So first, can you explain to us the difference between genomics and genetics? Because I know a lot of people, they use that term interchangeably, but how are they different and how are each one significant?
Okay, great question. And this is a great foundational point to understand genomics. Genetics is most easily defined as traits that are passed from parents to children or from one generation to another, where genomics is actually focused on understanding about the individual code or the genetic map of the individual, sequencing, whether it's livestock or sequencing the DNA of plants, etc. And analysis of that complete genome would be for a good definition of genomics.
So can you share a little bit of the history of heifer genomics and kind of why that became an interesting topic for dairy producers?
Sure. So years back, we had an inkling that there was that the control, if you will, of reproduction was different for heifers than for lactating cows. And indeed, as research went on, there are differences in the control of heifer reproduction. For example, heifer conception rate has different markers on chromosomes than cow conception rate. And that is significant because then that leads us to understand better how to manage heifers and what impacts heifers, and how to manage cows and what impacts cows. But essentially, it grew out of this understanding that fertility was not governed by the same genes or the same markers throughout an animal's life, that they were actually different. And then that provides more power to the livestock producer, the dairy producer, because then they can actually select not only for reproduction on a high level, but on a lower or more intense level, they can also select for heifer conception rate or heifer reproduction, and also look at cow reproduction.
Very interesting. So essentially, when they're picking for that heifer conception rate, they're looking at the maternal side, right? And how that's getting passed on. And then their conception rate would be there when they become a cow.
Right. So in general, the fertility, if we look at fertility in the largest sense, fertility traits would be passed on from both the sire and the dam. Okay. But when we're looking at heifer conception rate or cow conception rate, we're specifically looking at the individual's ability to conceive either at first service, second service, third service, or fourth service. Okay. And we did some research a few years ago where we identified particular markers on chromosomes in heifers that were associated with fertility at first service, and animals that did not conceive until fourth service or never conceived did not have the same markers.
I'm gonna pick up a little bit there. They don't have the same markers for cow and heifer conception rate. But is there any relationship, like as we have seen for, like, for example, repro and milk, that they are inverse, or is there any correlation at all between the heifer and the cow?
So this is a very good question. There are relationships between heifer conception rate and cow conception rate. And there are shared markers between the heifer conception rate and the cow conception rate markers within animals. However, the overlap of those is minimal. So the vast majority of reproductive control, if you will, by the genetic code is unique to animals that are adults, and that would share very little in common with those that are heifers. But there is some commonality. And what's very interesting, I would argue was very interesting, that kind of provides evidence that this is important, that these markers are important, is that we saw the markers for, let's say, heifer conception rate in Holstein heifers. But many markers in common, not all, but many of them have also been found in other animals, Angus-based animals, or Brahman-based animals, Jersey-based animals. So these we think are markers then that are very important for reproduction for the bovine.
Dr. Dalton, how does the synchronization protocols affect the studies that are going on or have been done on the genomics in cattle?
Great question. Great question. And the answer, at least for my experience, is very easy. We did not use animals that were in any timed AI protocols. So what we did is we focused on heifers that were receiving a prostaglandin, a single prostaglandin injection on day of entry to the AI pen. And then we focused on lactating cows that were identified in estrus. So it's an excellent point, because we have enjoyed an increase in reproductive efficiency that is partially due, no doubt, to synchronization programs. There's no doubt. It's also, to be fair, it's also due to increased management intensity, to increased health of animals, increased selection of animals. But yes, we can't deny that the protocols could play a role in data that we see. But the studies that I was involved in, we specifically worked with animals that were not in timed AI protocols.
Did you look into any genes related with pregnancy losses on the studies that you guys conducted?
So this is a good question. Thanks for asking it, Dr. Gomez-Leon. And we did have a small number of animals in our study that lost pregnancies. And there were some markers on chromosomes for pregnancy loss in heifers. So there are some. But now, having said that, we have to, there's a paper that's just out now from Milo Wiltbank's lab, where they're looking at what happens first, does the corpus luteum in a pregnancy loss situation decrease progesterone, and then therefore the embryo is lost? Or on the other hand, can we identify embryos that are dying or dead before progesterone goes down? It's a beautiful paper. And how to summarize it is, over their research, they actually saw about 50% of pregnancy loss in their research was due to early luteolysis, or loss of progesterone from the corpus luteum. On the other hand, the other 50% was not due to loss of progesterone. It was due to some sort of inherent embryonic problem. So we've got many different factors. We've got this factor of the body trying to maintain pregnancy. We've got this new being, this new entity that's rapidly dividing cells and trying to send the right signals and do the right thing. And then we also have the dam's genome on top of it. And then we can throw heat stress, 110 degrees on top of it, right?
So do heifers experience a lot of embryonic loss, kind of like cows do?
Okay, so cows actually have much more embryonic loss than heifers do. So then the question becomes, well, why is that? Why do we think that happens? Certainly, we know from past studies that both in heifers and in cows, fertilization actually occurs at a very high rate. Between 75 to 95% of all eggs that are ovulated are fertilized. The problem becomes is that much of the early embryo actually dies, and we see more of that in lactating cows. We believe it has to do, in many ways, with this heightened metabolic rate, which leads to, we know, increased clearance of hormones, which are beneficial not only for cyclicity, but also, in the case of progesterone, beneficial for maintenance of the pregnancy. So in short, heifers have very little pregnancy loss in normal, healthy situations compared to cows.
Dr. Dalton, thanks again for sharing all these insights and research results with us today. We also want to thank our listeners for joining the Repro Spot. We enjoy a lot the interview, Dr. Dalton. Thanks for your time and all your knowledge. Please, if you have questions or topic suggestions, contact myself or Dr. Jennifer Spencer. Our contact information can be found in the description below. We hope you have a wonderful day and stay tuned for the next podcast release. Thank you.